to bring the mind to your breath. Bring all the aspects of your mind to the gompa, to the place where you are sitting and listening. And let go of all the thoughts that are still occupied with what happened in the past. No matter how much they invest in the past, it's not going to change the past. And all the thoughts that are already running into the future, trying to think about what is going to come after this session or tomorrow. All that energy connected with your thoughts, either in the past or in the future, bring that energy to your body, to your breath. Only in the present moment do we have power over our actions. Do we have control over our actions? And our actions is what will determine our future. And then we set a positive motivation for tonight. So you can think that whatever you learn tonight about your mind, that you're going to use that to develop your potential of wisdom and compassion further. To open your heart. To investigate your mind. As a step towards the development of our full potential, which is our Buddhahood, our full awakening, our enlightenment. So that then we can be of greatest benefit to each and every sentient being. And then you can relax your attention. And so I'll start with a little recap from the last 2 weeks. We started looking into what is wrong with our mind. And before we go into that, I first want to say a little bit about how we spoke about the potential of the mind. And that the mind is that which is clear and knowing, that which has no characteristics of its own, which means that whatever arises in the mind doesn't exist inherently in the mind. That means that whatever arises in the mind, even if it is coming up a lot, It is not who we truly are. And whatever arises in the mind is not what we truly are, because it arises from causes and conditions, which means when causes and conditions change, then whatever arises in the mind also changes. And that means that we can train the mind almost in whatever way we want, you know, and that can be positive or that can be negative. And we know when we look into the world that there are places where this characteristic of the mind is used to train people in having very negative minds. But we can also use it to train our mind in the positive way. That's a choice that we have. And so because the mind has no characteristics of its own, that means that the potential for developing qualities is limitless. So we can develop our wisdom mind to a limitless capacity. We can develop our compassionate mind to a limitless capacity. We have the potential for that limitless wisdom and compassion already in our mind, but we are not able to access it due to our obscurations. And so what are these obscurations and where do they coming from? And we said that the root cause of our obscurations is that we grasp at the self. We believe in an objective existence of the self. And we project such a self onto everything. So things appear to us as if they have an objective entity, identity, as if that identity lives in an autonomous way, independent of anything else. So according to Buddhism, such entity cannot exist. Because everything that exists independence. And we spoke about 3 levels of dependency. Everything that exists, no, I shouldn't say everything, but you know, almost everything that exists, everything that is impermanent, arises in dependence upon causes and conditions. And then everything that exists arises in dependence on its parts, even the permanent things that exist. And then on top of that, there is a level of dependency which is more subtle, that is that everything that exists arises in dependence upon name and conception. So when we talk about table or car or chair or anything, that word, that label is coming from the mind. That's not coming from the object itself. And the image that we have of that thing is also coming from our mind. So things can only exist when they are known by the mind. It doesn't have to be my mind, any mind, the Buddha's mind. If something is not known by the mind, then it doesn't exist. Right? Sometimes we think that, you know, you have these things like the tree is falling in the forest. Is there any sound? Because there's nobody there that can hear the sound. In Buddhism, we say that things can only exist when there is a mind perceiving of its existence. All right. So then on the basis of that self-grasping mind, we have the self-cherishing mind. And the self-cherishing mind is that we feel that my happiness is more important than your happiness, or we feel that my suffering is much bigger or more important or than your suffering. We are quite self-centered, self-obsessed with what is going on for ourselves. And as soon as there's something going on for us, we have a need or we have unpleasant experiences. You can see that self-centeredness very much, you know, because you close your mind and it is very difficult to have any feeling, or at least you have less feeling with what is going on for others. Right? It happens automatically. We don't have to beat ourselves up for that. But we can look at that characteristic of mind, and we can do practices in order to counteract that. So this self that we have, that we believe exists inherently, but in itself it doesn't have such kind of quality. That self wants to be free from suffering and wants to find happiness. And so although there is nothing wrong with wanting to be happy, due to our self-centered attitude, every time when pleasant feelings arise, we react with attachment. We want more of it. And every time when unpleasant feelings arise, we try to separate from them. We want less. And so we react with aversion or anger. Wanting to experience pleasant feelings and wanting to be free from unpleasant feelings is a method that is only concerned with the most coarse type of suffering, the suffering of suffering. Can you remember that we spoke about that? So this is what we are doing the whole day. We are trying to move away from unpleasant feelings and move towards pleasant feelings. So what we are trying to do is to be free of the suffering of pain. And then the pleasantness that we experience, that is our happiness. But in Buddhism, what we are doing is only trying to free ourselves of the most coarse level of suffering, or the first type of suffering, the suffering of suffering, or the suffering of pain. And so sometimes lamas, teachers, they say, well, even an animal can do that. You know, they're all the time looking for the things that they like and moving away from the things that they don't like. So if we do nothing else than that, do we have a better life than an animal? Sometimes a bit confronting how the Tibetans are. But in a way, they are true. It's true what they're saying. And so they say also, as a human being, we have an intelligence that can help us to do more than that. Right? We can also think about the suffering of change, and we can think about the suffering of conditioned existence. Also, the way that we find happiness by following our pleasant feelings with attachment and moving away from unpleasant feelings with our aversion, that gives a temporary relief of suffering. And also, it is based on a very short-term view. You know, I want to be happy now. I want to have something that is good for me now. It's very difficult for us to wait. But if we look into the long term, and then I'm talking about not just this life, but also future lives, and we would only apply that method of, I want to be happy, and therefore I follow my attachment, and I want to be free of suffering, therefore I follow my aversion. In the long term, if we really check, we're actually creating a lot of causes for suffering. So this is very important, because in order to really free ourselves from suffering, we need to adopt a long-term vision. You know, even if you do not believe in future lives, the fact that you are so obsessed with this life means that you can only find that happiness by following your attachment. That's just how the mind works. So we'll talk about how we can change that. So what we said about conditioned existence is that we take rebirth again and again and again under the influence of karma and delusions. And then because we take a body under the influence of karma and delusions, the body that we have is under the control of karma and delusions. And also it constantly produces delusions. And so due to karma and delusions, we are not free of this cyclic existence. We keep repeating the same thing again and again and again, like the rat in the wheel, running after something, doing time, actually creating something similar than you already had. And so then we spoke also a little bit about what happiness is for Buddhism. And the real happiness that we are trying to achieve is a state that is freedom from the delusions, which also means it is free from conditioned existence. So what keeps us, so we looked at what keeps us in conditioned existence, which are the 8 worldly concerns. You know, I think you got a sheet with the 8 worldly concerns on that. So the 8 worldly concerns are just focused on the happiness of this life. And because of that, they are driven or they are motivated by attachment. And because attachment is a disturbing emotion, it is not able to bring us a happiness that is peaceful, that is calm. Attachment itself is disturbing the mind. So when we use that as a method to find happiness, we cannot expect our mind to become peaceful. So later we speak more about attachment and the nature of attachment. So the causes for suffering are karma and delusions. So today we're going to talk about how we can lessen and counteract the delusions. And we also talk about how we can counteract the root of the delusions, although I think that's probably going to come next week. How we counteract the self-grasping mind. And then we can talk about how we counteract the self-cherishing mind. So these last two, we do that next week. And so today we look a little bit into karma, and then we're going to look into the delusions. What we can do when delusions arise in the mind. Which tools do we have in order to lessen the delusions? Karma. I'm sure you all have heard many teachings on karma, right? So I say a little bit, and for the rest, I refer you to the Lamrim book. I just give you the essence. So we all know that every action that we are doing, whether that is an action with our body, whether that is an action with our speech or in our mind, it has an effect. And we have already seen that the way we find happiness is by following our feelings, which is a very short-term view. If we want to make sure that we create causes for happiness, we need to have a longer term of view, and we also have to shift our focus from being obsessed with our feelings to being more aware of our actions. Because it is our actions that is going to determine whether we're going to be happy or not in the future. And I also think that it is our actions that determines whether we're happy or not in the present moment. Right? When we talk about karma, we always talk about creating the causes for happiness in future lives. And I think many of us, they're not so interested in future lives. We want to be happy now. I understand that. But I think even if we create the causes for future happiness, these causes, creating these causes already makes us happy in the present moment. So what is the cause for happiness? You all know that. It is engaging in virtuous actions. If we create a virtuous action, that will leave an imprint in the mind that in the future will ripen into a similar experience. So virtuous actions are actions that are of benefit to others. Right? So when we save lives, when we are honest, when we speak truthfully, when we speak kindly, when we have thoughts that wishes others to be happy, that are generous, these actions all create causes for future happiness. But we know that when we engage in these actions, sometimes they can be a little bit painful. You know, but in general, when we are generous, we have a good feeling too. When we have kind thoughts, we feel good as well. When anything that you can think of, you know, sometimes practicing patience is not so easy. Sometimes practicing ethics is not so easy because somehow we have to give up something that looks like a short-term pleasure. You know, if we have to fill in the tax form and you want to really do it honestly, sometimes you have to pay a little bit more tax in order to do it really honestly. And so the temptation might be there, or if I change the numbers a little bit, I will have a little bit more money now, right? So that might feel like, do I really have to be honest? Well, you don't have to. But if you choose, you know, your mind will become stronger. Your mind will become more determined in creating virtuous actions. And so I think even we don't have to wait till next life to feel the results of creating virtuous actions. I feel that you can already experience that in this life. But the karma that we create with these actions, that will ripen in future lives. So I think what happens in the moment when you create virtuous actions, maybe good karma from the past starts to ripen. You know, maybe your virtuous actions become like a condition for good karma from the past to ripen. I think, you know, I'm not 100% sure about that. So karma means intention. The intention determines most of the result that we're going to experience. So the more sincere you are with your intention, the bigger the result. So doing actions, positive actions, but you don't really feel it. You know, if you are a starter, that's okay. You know, first we have to try to bring our body and our speech in line with virtuous actions. But then I think it's very good to also make sure that your mind is there as well, with a good intention. Sometimes I see, you know, I don't know, in Christianity it was a bit like that, and I also sometimes see Buddhists practicing like that, and I'm not excluded from that. You know, that you think, well, I'm doing positive actions of the body, I'm doing positive actions of my speech, so I do not have to worry so much about my mind. You know, and the mind still might become a mess. And I feel more and more, it is much more important that the mind is pure, that the mind is coming from a virtuous place. And then it's not so important how the action looks and what is coming out of your mouth, but you have to have a very good motivation. Then the rest, I think, comes natural. So, yeah. So any action that we do out of love, out of compassion, out of being generous, out of ethics, out of patience, maybe coming from an understanding of the nature of reality, all this kind of actions are examples of virtuous intentions, right? That we can practice straight away, because I'm sure you all are already doing a lot of that. So I'm going to leave it like that for the karma, because karma can be a huge topic. And if you go to any Lamrim book, you can find all the characteristics of karma and how karma ripens, and in what way karma ripens, and what makes karma heavy and what makes karma less heavy, and you know, all the characteristics of karma. And I'm going to go to the antidotes of the delusions, because that is what is most in our mind. And I mean, the actions are extremely important, right? Don't hear that wrong. I think when we can really shift our mind from I want to feel good to I'm going to be mindful of my actions, I think that will make a huge change in your life. Right? Very important. Then the delusions. I'm not going to say they're less important. I mean, the delusions, if we look into karma and delusions, they normally say which one is more important. They say the delusions. Why? Because if I have created a lot of negative karma in the past and I purify my delusions, I transform my delusions, and I stop the delusions by realizing the nature of reality, then that karma that I've created in the past cannot ripen anymore. But if I purify all my karma and I do not address all the delusions, then I will keep creating karma again and again and again. No matter how much I purify, I create more again and again and again. So in that way, the delusions are more important. Once we cut the delusions, we are free. And all the negative karma that we have gathered in the past, that cannot ripen anymore. So in terms of the delusions, we can think about what are the general antidotes and what are the specific antidotes. General antidotes you can apply to any delusion that arises in the mind. You know, they work for all the delusions. And then there are antidotes that are specific for certain delusions. So it's good to know both, you know. And then, but I think when you start applying the general antidotes, you cannot do already a lot to your delusions in general. So what all the delusions have in common, if there are any questions, you let me know, no? You can type them in. Let me have a check if there's nothing. Feel free at any time to do that, and I will sometimes stop and check. So if we look into the delusions, our attachment, our anger, our jealousy, our pride, what they all have in common is that they exaggerate the qualities of an object or a person. And when delusions arise, you can feel impelled to act. You know, the mind becomes uncontrolled. As a matter of fact, the delusions, they are controlling us. They control our thinking, right? If attachment is in the mind, if you want something and you can't get it, you know, your mind goes around and around and around, and you can't stop it, which means that attachment is controlling your mind. Same with anger. They not only control our mind, they also control our actions, and they disturb the mind. As soon as delusions are in the mind is disturbed. And because the delusions exaggerate, they are out of touch with reality. But when they arise in the mind, they appear so real and so true, and we believe in it. If somebody has harmed us, you know, that person can start to appear as a really bad person. And almost like all the qualities of that person, they become bad. And everything that person does becomes negative. And we believe it. And then we go to our friend and we say, do you see that too? And when they say, yes, I see that too, we believe it even stronger. Right? Same with attachment. Attachment exaggerates all the good qualities of an object. So when we're very attached to something, we don't want to think about the negative aspects that come with it when we have it, you know. We only think about the benefits that it's going to bring. And it appears like whatever that object is going to bring you or that person is going to bring you is only benefits. No disadvantages, no hassle, no nothing. Only good things. And you believe it. But you all know that sometimes, you know, you think you're going to buy something really fantastic and you buy it. And then once you have it home, you think, oh, you know, maybe you bought something really expensive and now you need to have an insurance And now you get all this worry that somebody's going to come and damage it, and maybe you don't have the money to replace it when it breaks down, and the worry comes, but you hadn't thought about that beforehand. Somehow we do not want to know. We don't care. If you don't care about disadvantages of something, you know, attachment is in the mind. All right. Same with relationships, when you fall in love, you know, that person looks so wonderful. Each and every aspect of the person is wonderful. But then when you're longer engaged, then you start to discover aspects that you hadn't seen before. That is how it appears like. So the delusions are a bit tricky. You know, they deceive us. They tell us one story and they give us the opposite. Or they tell us only one side of the story, not the other side of the story. So we look a little bit more on that when we go to the specific delusions. First, we'll talk about the general antidote to the delusions. So in general, we can say the delusions, they are either engaged in the future or in the past, but they're never in the present moment. Have you ever thought about that? Attachment is always about, not always, most of the time about the future. What is going to happen to us? What we want, where we want to go, how we want to do things. Sometimes attachment is with what has happened in the past and you want to re-experience that. But if you want to re-experience it, it's still somehow related to the future. You know, attachment causes this kind of anxiety. Well, aversion and anger and anything that comes with anger, resentment, any negative emotion connected to that, they are often focused on what has happened, on the past. And what they do is, it is like they're still trying to change the past. So one very strong antidote, and this is what we always do when we meditate, is bring the mind to the present moment. When the mind is in the present moment, the delusions cannot arise. When you are focused on your body, when you are focused on your feelings, and not in the sense of I'm going to follow my feelings, but I'm observing my feelings. It's very difficult, you know, even attachment might be triggered, even aversion might be triggered, but you're not going to follow that. You stay with your awareness in the present moment. Then the delusions will naturally subside. Mindfulness is therefore a very powerful antidote to all the delusions. That's one, mindfulness. Then the second one that we can do is challenging the belief that whatever the delusions is presenting us is true. So one way of saying that is, if it is really true what I perceive, then each and every person should perceive it like that. And we know that's not true. So because it's not true, it must be a perception of my mind. Or we can challenge it in the way that if something appears to us and it looks really true, it appears as existing independently, independent of causes and conditions. Or I should say not dependent upon causes and conditions, not dependent upon the parts, not dependent upon my mind. And then I can think, well, everything that appears, even if it looks very fantastic, that all is, how you say that? Impermanence is working on it, which means it's not always going to be like that, which means it's going to change. Even my perception is impermanent. I see it today like that, but let me wait 1 day or 2 days and see what happens, you know. Sometimes when you sleep over it, it's a very wise advice. Sleep over it and see what you want to do tomorrow, you know. Sleep over means often that the attachment or the aversion has a chance to disappear out of your mind. Then you can look again. So think about the dependency on the 3 levels of each object, of each person, of each relationship, of whatever happens to you. Your problem that arises in the mind. It looks so real. But also that problem arises due to causes and conditions. And maybe has not so much to do with you as you think it has. And so when you, whatever arises independent of causes and conditions will naturally cease to exist one day. Right? Often when there is a problem, we think, I have to fix the problem. And then we start interacting with these causes and conditions. And sometimes I think we might make it much worse. You know, we get so attached to whatever is there that we actually keep it going. And sometimes just backing off and letting the causes and conditions arise and then dissolve. Then the problem dissolves naturally. Right? So thinking about the nature of reality, of the things, the persons, the delusions, the mind perceiving it, helps as a general antidote. Excuse me. And then we can look into the fact that our delusions are deceptive. They give us the illusion that they are going to be able to give us what we want, or they're going to give us the illusion that they are able to control our future. You know, our attachment is in the future, thinking about something in order to be successful, in order to get something that we want, in order to achieve. Attachment is there. And the more we think about it, the more we have this feeling like, if I think in the right way, it's really going to happen like that. But if we do reality checks, then it is hardly ever going to happen like that. True. We can think about some meeting that we're going to have, how it's going to be, how we're going to feel, what we're going to say. And then when it happens, that hardly ever happens. So attachment tells us, if I think about it beforehand, I will have control over the outcome. And I think control is not with attachment, because attachment is controlling us. And so same with the past, you know, things that have happened to us. We think that when we think about it and when we are maybe even have anger in the mind, we want to what the anger wants to do, it wants to change what happened in the past. Have you ever observed that in your mind? The way how anger is entertaining your mind, or how it is the story that it is telling you. Something has happened that you don't like, and you go over how you could have done that differently. So then the anger is towards yourself, or your anger goes towards the other person, thinking, why did that other person not do something differently? Then this would not have happened. I would not have this hurt. So anger then gives you this feeling or this illusion. It is going to help you to change the past. And often we think that the way we think about how anger thinks about the past, trying to change, and how attachment is thinking about the future, trying to control the future, somehow we even believe that that is reality itself. But if we really check, thinking about the future, thinking about the past, it is taking us away from reality, because there is only one place where there is reality, which is where our body is, which is in the here and now. Right? If we would bring all our energy to our body in the here and now, this is the best place to prepare for the future. Be with all your energy in your body means that you have the most power to make change. And so you can do in the present moment whatever is needed that is going to help you to do what you need to do in the future. And the same for the past. If your energy is with your body, if you if your energy is in the here and now, then if something has happened in the past that you don't like, you can feel it, and you can do whatever you need to do in order to digest that, but then you can let it go. We cannot change the past. And so when we can bring the mind to the here and now, we become more real. We become more in contact with reality. And when we have more contact with reality, we have more connection with our good qualities. Maybe we can even see better what is really going on in our mind. What am I feeling? Why is it upsetting my mind so much? Maybe you want to do some analysis to understand what is going on in your mind. But also for that, you need to bring your awareness to the present moment. When the mind is in the present moment, then when disturbing emotions arise, we can catch them quite quickly. If you do not have a lot of mindfulness, it can take you days before you realize, oh, I think my mind is full of attachment at the moment, But if you're mindful in the present moment, again and again and again, you train your mind in that, you can catch your mind quite easily, quite early, not easily, quite early. And when you catch the delusions, when they start to arise, it is very easy to apply the antidote, and you do not need to work so hard, But I know that it is hard work to bring the mind to the present moment. But you get more control over your mind when you do that. And also when the mind is in the present moment, you can observe the feelings. And the more you are staying connected to your feelings, it is almost like you create a little gap between the feelings and your reaction to the feeling. The feeling and the reaction of attachment or aversion. And so then you take also a lot of power away from the delusions. Right? That is a general antidote. And then there is I have two more. One is that we remember the nature of the mind. So for instance, when anger arises in the mind, if I remember that that is not who I truly am, nor is that anger really the nature of my mind. And then I start to contemplate on what the nature of the mind really is. For instance, I learned from one monk. He said, anger arises in the mind, but my mind is not the anger. And the anger is not my mind. The mind is something that arises in my mind. And whatever arises in my mind will naturally dissolve back into the mind. There is anger in my mind, but my mind is not the anger, and anger is not my mind. And so every time when anger arises, you can repeat that. And you will see that when you start doing that, yeah, the anger will be there for a while, depending on how strong you have been habituating yourself with anger. But then it will go. The only way that we can generate more anger is when we become the anger. I am angry. Then the whole thing starts. Then all the thoughts come that disturb the mind even more, that make you more angry. But if you allow that anger to arise and you say, but it's just in my mind, due to causes and conditions, these emotions arise in the mind. We cannot stop that until we realize emptiness. So as long as we haven't realized emptiness, we need to apply methods. Don't beat yourself up when there's anger in your mind. Don't beat yourself up when there's attachment in the mind. These are reactions that we have under the influence of our ignorance. We are not in control of that. Right? So we have to apply some kindness to ourselves. All right? You can also think that whatever arises in the mind, it's like you can see them as clouds, or you can think about them like waves. There's a big wave coming. When strong negative emotion comes, it can feel like a wave. Well, you can say every ocean has a wave. You don't have to become the wave. You can observe the wave coming and going. And so then whatever arises in the mind, we need to be accepting and non-judgmental. We have been habituating with the negative emotions since beginningless time, we say in Buddhism, which means that we have never been free of the disturbing emotions. And the way our mind works is that they come up most natural, because that is what we have been habituating with lifetimes. So even when we start applying antidotes, it's not going to happen from one day to the other. It will take some time. So then when things arise in the mind, no matter how often your anger arises, don't judge that. Don't judge yourself. But try to apply the antidote and then support yourself in having done that. Wow, you did it, Even if it takes you 5 minutes, 1 hour, 3 days before you notice what is going on in your mind. The moment you notice, if you then start applying the antidote, you can say, well done. That was really well done. Right? Don't beat yourself up for having walked around 3 days with an angry mind. Because we are not in control. That's just a proof of that. But once you recognize and then you do something, that is a very virtuous action. And that is the beginning of the change. Next time you catch yourself earlier, then you catch yourself earlier. And then you have, the anger will stay less long in your mind. The anger will become less strong in your mind. Same with attachment. And then slowly, it has less grip. It has less influence over you. But we cannot totally eliminate it. Not yet. That's going to take a while. So I have to really speed up if I want to talk about attachment and anger. When we apply mindfulness and we become more aware of the feelings and our reactions to the feelings, what we're going to try to do, and I think this is such an essence of Buddhist practice, instead of following the pleasant feelings and trying to separate from the unpleasant feelings, we're going to try to learn to let go when pleasant feelings arise in the mind. And we're going to try to embrace or fully feel the unpleasant feelings. The whole Tonglen is based on that. And I think we can start practicing that first with ourselves. How does it work? We take on the suffering of all sentient beings. But what about sitting with our own unpleasant feelings? That's often the tricky one. What about letting go our pleasant feelings instead of running after them? If we would know how to do that, you already have made huge steps towards becoming ready to practice the Mahayana, where you take on the suffering of others. So do you know how to sit with unpleasant feelings? Did we ever speak about that? I don't think so, huh? No? Shall I say a little bit about that? Okay, I'll say a little bit. So somebody, Sue raised a hand. It says, don't know what that means. Is that a question or is that? No question in the chat, no. So unpleasant feelings, when they arise in the mind, what we want is we want to run away, because unpleasant feelings mean I suffer. And nobody wants to suffer. Nobody wants to have that experience. So we have unbelievable many ways of not being with unpleasant feelings. We cover up, we deny, we pretend they're not there. We think maybe now I don't have time to do that, maybe later. But to really feel it is difficult, no? So I think actually that is really an art, to learn how to be with unpleasant feelings. And what I'm going to tell you is coming from, her name is Kristen Neff, and she has written a lot of books on self-compassion. And she has a website which is called selfcompassion.org, where you can find meditations, where you can find other resources of how to be with unpleasant feelings. But there are 3 things that are really needed in order to process unpleasant feelings in a proper way. And the better we can do that, the less anger will arise in the mind, the less aversion will arise in the mind. And when there is less aversion for experiences in the mind, then there is also less attachment for the opposite in the mind. So I think this has great value to train our mind in doing that. So these 3 aspects that we use in order to be with unpleasant feelings is being mindful. So we already have said a lot about that. Being mindful of what you're feeling. And then the second one is applying kind self-talk. And I don't know about you, but most people, when unpleasant feelings are in the mind, they to beat themselves up. I'm getting it. Am I still okay with my internet? Can you still hear me well? Yes. Okay. What's that? Is that up or down? A little bit. Yeah, I said I got a thing that it is a bit unstable. If it's getting too bad, you tell me. So when we have unpleasant feelings arising in the mind, often there is very unkind self-talk that comes with that. You know, oh, you were so stupid, and didn't you see what was happening? And right, you know what kind of swear words you use for yourself. Would you ever say that to a good friend who is experiencing what you are experiencing? Oh no, never. We wouldn't say that to anyone except to ourselves, right? And with that unkind self-talk, we add so much suffering to what we are already experiencing. So we have a suffering experience, and then we add with our negative self-talk so much more suffering. And so learning to talk to yourself when you are suffering as if you are talking to your best friend, I think that's what we need to learn. And then the third one that can help us to be not so locked up in that unpleasant feelings. You know, normally when suffering arises in the mind, and there is aversion in the mind, what it does is it gives us the feeling of being separate from everybody else, that we are alone in that experience. And I think that feeling of separation comes from the aversion and the anger. And that separation makes that it is much harder to really digest the feeling. So what we do is we remember that this is not just about me. This is just a human experience. And there are many human beings in the world who have a similar kind of experience. And so somehow we're trying to find a way that we can connect again with human beings. And I don't know, sometimes, you know, sometimes there are days that I'll talk about me. There are days that I feel really shitty and I think, what's going on? I don't know what's going on, you know? And then I talk to a friend and she says, oh, I've been feeling so shitty the last few days. And but I read that it has something to do with a full moon or whatever, you know, new moon. Or the moment I hear that, feeling is gone. The suffering is gone. It's like you are out of your isolation. You're not the only one who's feeling this. Then it's just a feeling coming and going, you know, you no reason to hold on to it. So have you ever experienced that? As soon as you start sharing, oh, I have the same, the suffering is much less. So you got these three aspects: being mindful of what you're feeling, cultivating positive self-talk, and then remembering you're not alone in the experience. And then for more information on that, you can go to Kristen Neff's website, selfcompassion.org. So when we know how to be with unpleasant feelings, the better we can be with that, the less the need for anger to arise. Anger is our attempt to protect us from unpleasant feelings. Anger appears like our big protector. I'm going to separate you from unpleasant feelings. And then the more anger is in the mind, you know, the more unpleasant feelings we have. And still we believe if I just use this anger, the unpleasantness will go, the suffering will go. but you only get more. Right? This is this deceptiveness of anger. It is not giving you what you want. It is not separating you from the suffering. What anger is very good at, or the aversion, or, you know, when we are in physical danger and we have to jump for our life, then that force is fantastic. It's separating us from the event. But what we do mentally with anger is only adding to suffering. It's not helping us to separate us from suffering. So if we start thinking about how we can counteract anger, and I won't have time to do the whole thing, you know, but what Buddhism always does is you're going to think about all the disadvantages of the disturbing emotion, whether that is anger or attachment. You think about the disadvantages, and then you think about all the advantages of generating the antidote. And that gives a kind of inspiration to start doing it, you know. But for me, the main thing is you are harming yourself when anger is in the mind. And when you can see that, I hope that is enough motivation for you to start applying the antidote. And so when there is anger in the mind, that means there is suffering in the mind. And so then first you apply these three things that we just talked about, that you are with the suffering feeling, that you feel it, that you're mindful of it, that you speak kindly and lovingly towards yourself. And then with whatever anger is still in the mind, you know, there are two main antidotes to anger. One is patience. Patience is a mind that is undisturbed by harm. It is a mind that is bearing the hurt, bearing the hardship. And so you practice that on your cushion by thinking about what happened and by thinking about all kinds of reasons so that the mind doesn't get disturbed. And the second one is loving kindness, you know, because anger is a mind that wants to harm. It is a mind of malice. If we are really angry with someone, we like to see that other person suffer. Right? So then when loving kindness is in the mind, what we try to do is that person that we would like to see suffer, we're going to wish that person to be happy. And so once we can generate a mind that wishes that person to be happy, the mind that wishes that person to suffer, which is anger, cannot arise. They cannot arise at the same time. So these are the main antidotes to anger. And then the antidote to attachment. Let me see next time, maybe I can, if I have next time the time, I'll talk a little bit more about attachment and the nature of attachment, because, you know, we are living in the desire realm where everyone is motivated by attachment. And the better you can see how attachment makes our life actually empty. And I think, you know, you as practitioners, you actually know already about this. But just following your attachment is never going to give you fulfillment, no matter how hard you try. But the best antidote to attachment is remembering impermanence and death. So also with the 8 worldly dharmas, the best antidote to the 8 worldly dharmas is remembering impermanence and death. So what you do is you think about your own life and that this life is not going to last forever. You think about the impermanence of other human beings, of animals that are close to you, of things that you are attached to. You think about their impermanence, but very much your own impermanence. Once you start to realize your own impermanence on a deeper level, the concerns for this life, they become automatically less strong, which means that the 8 worldly concerns become less strong. You know, you see that it is all relative, that it is all going to disappear, that there is no reason to hold on to it. It's not that you're necessarily focused on next life, but holding on to it in this life doesn't make any sense anymore. So that is the most important one with to counteract attachment. And another one to counteract attachment is practicing contentment. Contentment with what you have. Or as we say nowadays, you practice gratitude. Right? If you practice gratitude with 5 things that you have and that you feel grateful for, you write that down every day, you know, attachment becomes much less. And also, I think when we do this, we feel the obsessed mind, the mind of attachment. You know, it is the more you practice the opposite, the more you start feeling that actually it's quite an annoying energy. You know, that is trying to let you do things that have no benefit for you. So these are the 2 main antidotes to attachment. Meditating on impermanence, especially your own impermanence, and meditating on contentment. And I say meditating, but you can also just reflect during the day. You know, when you see things arising in your mind, you can use that moment to reflect. Meditation is not necessarily on the cushion. All right, how is everyone? Good. Yes, I hope I didn't go too fast through everything. Could you catch up? Could you keep up? Are there any questions? I can unmute you and you can ask the question if you have any. No, there are no questions. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
You want to ask a question?
Okay, unmuted now. Yes.
Yes.
Going back to something that you mentioned last week about
Yes.
the enormous amount of freedom that comes once you
Yeah.
can get the delusions, and that sometimes it's the feeling when you do start to get some sort of sense of what that is, it can also be quite overwhelming and like a little scary. You know, you've got all this freedom. What do you do with it? Sort of like, and sometimes for me anyway, sometimes that feeling that arises is, oh my goodness, what do I do now? You know, what am I going to do if I get there? So
Yes.
is this like, do you just keep practicing, or what happens with this?
So I'll unmute you again. What I think what happens is we are so used to living life with the delusions and by the delusions that sometimes I wonder that thinking about not having the delusions can even feel like you don't exist anymore. What do you have to identify with? You know, where is your purpose going to be? How you going to live life? And sometimes I even feel that letting go our identification with the delusion can feel like a death. or a small death, like I have no idea what is going to come after when I'm going to go through this, you know, when a letter will go, no idea. And I know the feeling. I had it several times, and every time things arise, you know, life just continues. And life changes, and life takes you to places that you could never ever, this is for me, I never ever could have thought about doing what I'm doing now when I started, never ever. But somehow the things just happen, you know, even if I don't have the idea, doesn't mean that then nothing happens, no, because karma keeps ripening, and life keeps bringing things to you. And I know the feeling that then what do you do, you know? Like there is nothing else to do. But we are on a gradual path. And if I look at Lama Zopa Rinpoche, it's not that he has nothing to do while he has freedom, no? I think then you use that freedom to work for other sentient beings, maybe. You know, there's so much to do in life. There is so much that we can do, especially for others. So the advantage is that you're not distracted anymore. You're not occupied with stuff that has not really any deep purpose. I don't know. I think you just become more light-hearted. I don't know. Does that help? Yes. Sometimes it feels like this is going to be, you know, I'm going to stab off the cliff and I'm going to fly, and then what, you know? But you just have to do it and then see what happens. It's not that life is going to stop, but life can become very different. And so, yes, you need a lot of trust, but sometimes you just also have to make the step and leave it all behind, you know? It's like we have been dragging this big sack with us, you know, full of kilos of karma and heaviness, and somebody says just let it go, and you say, but then what do I going to drag, you know? Why do we want to do that in the first place? Because we are so used to it. Yeah. And I think it has a lot to do with just that, being so used to it that you think, then what, you know? But I'm sure that when then what comes, there is so much, you are so free to do maybe finally what you always wanted to do for others. But I know the fear, and I know that also sometimes you go through it and then you pick up part of the sack because you're so used to carrying it with you, you know? And so we have to learn how to do that. Really letting go, not looking back. Is that okay? Yes, okay.
Venerable, I have a question.
Yes.
Selfcompassion.org. What was the lady's name, please?
Kirsten Neff.
Sorry, beg your pardon?
I'll write it in the chat box. Then you can get it after. Is that okay?
Is it Christian?
Kirsten Neff,
Kirsten or
Kirsten,
Kirsten,
K-I-R-S-T-E-N. Oh, right, Kristen, yeah, N-W-N-E-W.
Or is it Kristen?
Kristen, yeah, it's Kristen.
Kristen, yes. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Kristen, yeah. But if you Google self-compassion, you get her, you know, because she has started that whole movement of self-compassion and research, and so you will always find her name. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. So then shall we do the meditation? Yeah. I just unmute you. I have a meditation on love, where I will incorporate these aspects of self-compassion, how we can do that with ourselves, and then how we can give that to others. All right, because we want to go there eventually, no? So to start with the meditation, you make sure that you sit comfortable. And give yourself a little bit of time to let the mind settle. And you can focus on your breath by observing the rising and falling of your abdomen until you feel calm and your focus is in the here and now. And then imagine all living beings around you. And then see yourself as you are now, with all your faults and shortcomings. And with the recognition that you have the potential to free yourself from all your problems. How do you feel with yourself? Do you feel safe, loved, appreciated? How do you speak to yourself? Are you supportive or more critical? What would happen if you would accept yourself exactly as you are, without any judgment? What would happen if you would speak to yourself in a kind, loving, and supportive way? And how would things change when you realize that the suffering that you are experiencing in your life is not just your suffering, but it is a suffering that you share with so many others? It is a human experience, and you're not the only one experiencing that. See your needs, your hurt, your love, your tolerance, and your compassion. And generate from the depth of your heart a wish for yourself to experience all the happiness and goodness you can imagine. Send from your heart white light, which fills your whole body, giving you everything you need. When you need love, send love to yourself. When you need understanding, send understanding. When you need connection, send connection. Until all your needs are fulfilled and you experience happiness, bliss, and a smile appears on your face. Then pay attention to all those living beings around you. Your mother is on your left, your father on your right, and your friends and relatives are behind you. Visualize in front those you dislike or who have hurt you. And all other sentient beings are around you in human form, right to the horizon. They're all sitting quietly, like you. And a sense of harmony and peace pervades everyone. How nice would it be if you were able to love all these beings? Just as you, they all want to be happy, they all want to be free from suffering. And they're all trying to make the best of their lives, even those who are angry and violent. The love that you have just generated for yourself and which has filled your whole body with light and love starts to overflow and flows out to the others. Start with your family and those close to you. A warm, luminous energy radiates from your body, touching them and filling their whole bodies and minds. Think sincerely when you look at each of them. May you be happy, may you be well. May all your thoughts be positive and all experiences good. And you visualize that the light that's coming from your body is giving them everything they need until they are completely fulfilled. Their minds become peaceful, clear, and full of pure happiness. And a blissful smile appears on their face. Then turn your attention to the people in front of you, those that you have difficulty with. Contemplate that they are also in need for happiness and that you can give that to them by sending them love. Imagine your positive, loving energy flowing out of your heart to those people, filling their whole bodies and minds. Think sincerely when you look at each of them. May you be happy, may you be well. May all your thoughts be positive and all experiences good. And the light coming from your body transforms into everything they need until they are completely fulfilled. Their minds become completely peaceful, clear, and full of pure happiness. A blissful smile appears on their face. Continue to send your positive, loving energy out to all the other people. Imagine that your love flows into every direction, reaching all beings. Think of those who are lonely or busy. the sick and the healthy, the hungry and the well-fed. Those who are confused and those with a clear mind. Think of those who are oppressed and those who are oppressing. Think of those who are frustrated and those who are irritating. Think of the frightened and the frightening. And with each and every one of them, you think sincerely, may you be happy, may you be well. May all your thoughts be positive and all experiences good. And you visualize that you give them everything they need until they are completely fulfilled. Their minds become completely peaceful, clear, and full of pure happiness. And a blissful smile appears on their face. And then contemplate your own potential to love everyone and rejoice in that capacity. Generate a strong wish to develop this potential more and more. To do this, we have to overcome our self-centered mind with all its disturbing emotions and keeping our mind open for the big universal love, which leads to happiness of ourselves and others. And then we dedicate all the positive energy of this meditation, but also all the merit that we created with listening and reflecting during the teachings. We dedicate it to all beings, including ourselves, that we all find temporary and ultimate happiness. And we can think that all the merit created by generating a positive motivation and by doing these positive actions tonight, that any living being, just by seeing, hearing, touching, remembering, or talking to me, is immediately freed from all obstacles to happiness from disease, spirit harm, negative actions, and obscurations, and quickly achieve the highest happiness of full enlightenment. Thank you very much. If you can, it's a really nice practice to keep practicing during the week. You know, sending love, wishing other beings well. Whoever you meet, I wish you well. I wish you to be happy. That's the practice of loving kindness, and it's going to give you a wonderful feeling as well. And next time we'll talk about how we can address the self-grasping mind and the self-cherishing mind. And however much time I think I have left, I will talk a little bit about attachment and what attachment is doing to the mind. Because the better we can recognize that, the easier it is to address. And attachment is not an easy one, you know. It is the one that makes us feel alive. So to give that up or to counteract that is not so easy. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I will send a link. I will upload this on YouTube, and then I'll send a link to Glenys, and you can have it if you want to watch it back. Okay.